We're looking at community, and we're looking at how God created us for relationships with one another. Most importantly, for a relationship with Him, but also for relationships with one another. And we talked about this last week, and we're going to talk about it again this week, but there's this truth. It's a principle. It's true whether you like it or not, and it is this. You become who you spend the most time with. You become who you spend the most time with. This is why when you have like a best friend and you spend all your time together, you end up talking like each other. And maybe you don't even realize it, but all your friends realize it because you just have the same, like you have the same lingo, you have the same way that you say certain things, the same mannerisms, and you just become the people that you're with. And even if you don't like it, you start to sound like your family and your parents and your siblings because you spend a lot of time together. Even if you are really involved here at 1122, people from the outside come in and they're like, you all talk the same. That's just because when you're around somebody, you tend to become like them. And we are better together. And this truth is a principle that's true whether we like it or not. But it's not just enough to hang out with anyone. So this idea that we're like, okay, I'm just supposed to hang out with people, that's not really the point of why God built us for relationships. There are specific types of people we should hang out with. And we talked about this verse from Proverbs 13:20 last week. We talked about the first part. Tonight we're going to focus on the second part, but we'll just say it again together or read it together. He who walks with the wise grows wise. Okay, we talked about that last week. Great. When you are with wise people, you naturally become more wise just by being around them. Not because you're smarter, not because you're more talented, but just because you're with the right people, you become who you spend the most time with. You hang out with wise people, you become wise. But the second part is what we're going to focus on tonight. But a companion of fools. Everybody say fools. All right, this is important, especially in high school. Listen to me. I've done student ministry a long time, and I've seen this thing happen over and over again. Where students, even students who love Jesus and they're going on the mission trips and they're going to the one weekends and camps and all that, they're doing the Bible study, they're posting their Devo on Instagram and all that. They start hanging out with the wrong people, especially that transition from 8th to 9th grade. 9th graders, you gotta watch out. You gotta watch out. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And 9th grade is a time where people get stolen from, killed, and destroyed because they find the wrong people. They start to hang out with fools and they think it's cool. And they think it will get them popularity points and make high school better. But it actually leads to destruction. The companion of fools suffers harm. Suffers harm. When I was in middle school, I lived in Tampa, and I'd gone to public school my whole life. And then my area of town, they like shipped us off downtown to a school that wasn't so great. So I went there for like a semester. My parents weren't huge fans. And so for the first time in my life, I got sent to a private school, private Christian school. So for those of y'all who go to Providence, it was kind of like a Providence situation. And I'd been in public school my whole life. And then after middle school, I would go back to public school. And in college, I'd go to public school. So this was very new to me. And furthermore, I was not in the same tax bracket as most of the kids in this school because my dad's a pastor. And so we got in on some kind of Christian scholarship or something. And so, I started going to this school, and all these kids have known each other since like elementary school, since pre-K. So I walk into this situation in February of my 6th grade year. Like, I mean, y'all know how that is to go somewhere mid-year, but especially in 6th grade. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Middle school is a sad, hard time for most of us. And so I go to this school, and I don't get along with anybody. I'm not like them. I've never worn a uniform before. And 6th grade that second semester in 6th grade was kind of a lonely time. 7th grade, not a whole lot better. And then 8th grade came around, and I am, you guys see maybe a version of me that's a little bit more outgoing when I'm here. I am pretty shy and reserved the first few times I meet people, but especially when I was in middle school and a teenager in high school, all that. I was very, very reserved until I got very comfortable. And so about 8th grade, I start to feel a little bit more comfortable. And I start to kind of just be like my natural self. I'm talkative, I'm ADD, and I joke around a lot. And I started to talk to people and hang out with people that I had not talked to or hung out with in the past because I would just keep to myself. I'd do my schoolwork, and then I'd go home, and I didn't really talk to many people in 6th and 7th grade because I was just uncomfortable. And then in 8th grade, I kind of start coming out of my shell. And one day, I'm in this classroom that they had taken this small classroom and they were trying to fit more classes in this building. And so they had taken a small classroom and split it into 2 even smaller classrooms that only like 15 people could fit into. And they had put this kind of really thin wall in between them. So it just had some like 2x4s and sheetrock and that not even any insulation. It was very thin walls. And so there was the first wall that you would walk into, or the first room that you would walk into, and then there was a little office, a door into a teacher's office where they shared, the 2 teachers in the classroom shared an office, and then you take a right and you'd end up in this second classroom. All right. So one day I get in there, and again I'm feeling myself. I'm like, I got friends. I'm cool now. And so I go from, the teacher wasn't in there and the bell hadn't rang, so I go to the other classroom where some of my friends were, not the classroom I was supposed to be in. And, it's middle school. And so boys just start chasing each other. So this guy just starts chasing me around the room. And, 13-year-old guys are idiots. And so I'm just like running around my classroom and running around those desks, the desks where you stick your books inside, those kind of things. So I'm running around. And then I come around the corner of a desk, and I remember, there's just certain things that stick with you. I look up, and my vision is blocked by the torso of the largest guy in the middle school. His name was Patrick Skidmore. He just sounds large, and he was like 250 pounds as an 8th grader. He was like 6'4", massive young man. And so there's something that happens when a 90-pound 8th grade boy runs into a 250-pound 8th grade boy. This is just a physics lesson for you. The 90-pound does not push the 250-pound over. The 90-pound bounces off. So this is what happens. So I run around the corner. I look up. There's this massive collared T-shirt just in front of me, and I run into him, and like his torso's just in my face, and I bounce off. And, it just happens like this. And all of a sudden, my behind is in the wall, all right? So I'm like, oh no. So I kind of take my behind out of the wall, and there's a hole through to the next classroom, and all my other classmates in the class I was supposed to be in are all looking at me like, and then right at that moment, guess who walks in? The teacher, right? It's always at the moment. And they're like, Ryan, why are you? And they start yelling at me and all that, and they sent me, for the first time in my life, I got sent to the principal's office. I know, I got a testimony. So I go in there, and I get a referral. For the first time in my life, I get a referral, and they made me, they called my parents, and, they weren't happy, and then they made me pay to fix the wall, and I was so embarrassed, and I was just so like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. And I remember talking to a teacher a couple days later, and she was just like, Ryan, last year, I know this year you're a little bit more talkative. You're hanging out with some different people. And I've just noticed that you're changing a little bit. And you're not being who you used to be. And you may like it because you might feel more included and you might feel more connected to other students. But you're turning into somebody that I've not known you to be. And even, 25 years later, that still sticks with me. And sure, it was a silly, kind of low stakes environment. I fell through a wall, no big deal. I paid to get it fixed. I got a referral. Who cares? And then I moved on. But here's the thing. A lot of times when we hang out with the wrong people, it doesn't end up with broken walls. It ends up with broken lives. This word in the Hebrew for suffers harm literally means broken to pieces. So let me read it to you that way. He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools is broken to pieces, and especially when you get into high school. I'm not saying it doesn't affect middle schoolers, and I'm not saying it doesn't affect adults, but especially in high school and going into college. There is no more maybe practical teaching that can change your life than this. And there are so many decisions you guys are faced with about relationships and who you spend time with and who you belong to and where you align with other people that can change your life for the good and for the bad. So I'm going to start with the bottom line, and then we're going to talk about it through Scripture. Here's the bottom line. Surrounding yourself with foolish people will lead to pain. Surrounding yourself with foolish people will lead to pain. And here's the thing about this one. It doesn't even necessarily matter that they're saved, because y'all got some Christian friends who are fools. Fools. They are making foolish choices. And yes, when they die, they're going to go to the pearly gates and they're going to say, well done, good and faithful servant, because of what Jesus did for you on the cross. But right now, their life is terrible. And if you spend all your time with them, guess where you're going to be? And you might be like, but they're Christians. And it's like, yeah, but they're living foolish lives. They are walking in disobedience, and you are going to experience pain if you keep hanging out with them. There's very few messages that have the chance to change the trajectory of your teenage and college years than this message, than this scripture, than this principle. And so we're going to see how it kind of plays out in 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. And I know we don't read out of 1 Kings a whole lot, so let me give you a little bit of context as to what's going on. 1 Kings, let me backtrack a little bit. There's a nation called Israel. This is the people of God, and they want a king. They're like, God, you're not enough for us. Give us a king. And so he's like, all right, you asked for it. So he gives him Saul. That doesn't go so well, and Saul gets kicked out, and he gets replaced by a guy named David, King David. David and Goliath, that guy. And he's a hero for Israel, and he builds this mighty nation. And he doesn't always get it right, but things go pretty good for him. And then he has a son named Solomon. Now, David built the foundation, but under Solomon, the nation was was richer and bigger land-wise and stronger and more powerful than ever before in the history of Israel and ever since. And so it's going really, really good. They got massive armies, tons of money. People from all over the world come to visit Solomon because of his wisdom. And things are going pretty good in Israel. And then Solomon dies. And he's got a son named Rehoboam. Everybody say Rehoboam. Now, Rehoboam, I don't think you probably know many Rehoboams. And one, because it's a stupid name. And two, because of the story that we're going to look at tonight. Nobody wants to name their kid after this guy because of what he does. So Rehoboam is Solomon's son. And he is going to take over a kingdom at its climactic point. The largest, wealthiest, strongest it has ever been. All right, verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. All right, young guy, son of Solomon, he's going to become king. And as soon as Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard about it, for he was still in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon, he was one of Solomon's enemies, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt. And they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and said to Rehoboam, and here's what they say. All the people come before this newly crowned king, and they say this. Your father, Solomon, King Solomon, made our yoke, this is like a burden, like something that they carry, made our yoke heavy. So therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. Here's what had happened. Solomon taxed the people of Israel in very large amounts and percentages. And he took the young men from the homes of their families to become soldiers for these massive armies. And he forced many of the people of Israel into large construction projects. And so things were good, but it was a lot of hard work. And so the country needs a break. And they're like, all right, Rehoboam, we love your dad. He was great. Things are going good. Could you just give us a little bit of a break? And he said to them, go away for 3 days and then come back to me. So the people went away. Now, this is really wise. Good stuff. He's going to take some time to make a really important decision. Great. He's being wise so far, following after daddy. All right. Then King Rehoboam took counsel. He's going to be wise again. He's going to go to the old men, the gray heads. These are the guys that stood before Solomon, his father, while he was alive. The people that advised his father, the grandfathers and the elders of Israel. And he's going to ask them what to do. Really, really wise choice. So he says, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they said to him, if you'll just be a servant to these people today and serve them and speak good words to them when you answer them, they will be your servants forever. They will be your servants forever. So things are going good so far. He's taking time. He's thinking about it. He's going to the right place and the right people to make his decision to get advice. He's walking with the wise. But, this is a bad but. But he abandoned the counsel that the old men gave him, and he took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. I mean, this is Proverbs 13:20 in a verse, in action. He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. So here's what he does. There's two problems with this issue. He goes to young men. Y'all know any young men? Men? Boys? Y'all know any young men? Maybe you are one. Girls, I know y'all have seen some young men in action, and it's rarely pretty. All right, so first problem. These men are young, meaning they've never led anything. They are fools, not because they're stupid, but because they just haven't experienced anything. They may not even be fathers or husbands, much less leaders of a nation. They don't know anything. These guys are just a bunch of college punks. Like, they're just young dudes who have never done anything. So that's the first problem. And here's something you should really focus on. You need to beware of advice from people who have not done anything in their lives. You should just beware. Furthermore, you should beware of anybody who tries to give you advice and they're no further along than you. Now, that doesn't mean a 16-year-old or 17-year-old can't give you good advice. You just got to be cautious. You got to be cautious when you're talking to people who have never gone any further in life than you. It'd be like if Google Maps didn't exist and I was going to a new town and I stopped for directions and I ask someone who is a first-time visitor to the city about where to go. It would be stupid to listen to them. They've never even been there before. I would go to a local. I've been there. I would go to someone who has been there in the past. And so you got to be really careful when people your age or younger than you are giving you advice because they're no further along than you. This is why in this student ministry, we have family group leaders. Family group leaders, please stand up. I know I do this a lot. Family group leaders, stand up. Stand up, stand up, all y'all. Look at this. All right. These people come every single week. Y'all can sit back down. These people come every single week, not because they get paid, not because they get any free gifts or anything. They come because they love Jesus and they love you and they want to pour into the next generation. And here would be the dumbest thing we could do. If we were just like, all right, 9th grade boys, pick a leader out of the 9th grade boys. And he's going to lead you. It'd be like the blind leading the blind. It wouldn't go well, all right? We know that you need people that are a little further along in life than you. Now, are these leaders perfect? No. Do they have life fully figured out? No. Most of them are in their 20s. But here's what I do know. They know a heck of a lot more than you do. And they have gone through more than you have. And they have wisdom and experience to share with you about how to follow after Jesus. And so the first problem is this guy listens to young people. But the second thing is equally important. It says they grew up with him. So here's what this means. These are like his homeboys that he grew up with in the neighborhood. Like, these are the guys that, played video games together and they played sports together and like they had just grown up having all their stupid, immature jokes and all of that. And here's why that's important. Because these guys were unlikely to tell him the hard truth. Think about it this way. Their best friend just became the king of the most powerful kingdom in the area. So what's the one thing they don't want to do? Make him angry. They don't want to get on his bad side. It will cost them. They want to be like the vice president or the treasurer or the secretary of state. They want to be up high in the government. And so they're going to say things that he wants to hear. They're not going to say hard things to him. They don't want to upset him. Here's the truth. Foolish friends will tell you what you want to hear instead of the truth. Foolish friends will tell you what you want to hear instead of the truth. You should totally date him. They just don't want to have an awkward conversation and tell you the truth about that guy that you like. And so they'll just be like, yeah, sure. Your bros in the locker room, they'll just tell you, yeah, go there on Friday. Do this. Yeah, they'll encourage you into foolishness because they'd rather do that than say something that gets them made fun of, or than to make you angry, or to say something that's awkward and brings about some level of awkwardness or tension in the relationship. And so most people are just like, well, it ain't me, it ain't my life. So I'm just gonna agree with them so that they keep going in the direction and I don't have to feel tension or awkwardness. Foolish friends will tell you what you wanna hear instead of the truth. So he goes to these young guys who he grew up with. And he said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father put on us? And the young men who had grown up with him, it reminds us they're young and they grew up with him. They said to him, thus shall you speak to the people who said to you, your father made our yoke heavy, but you lightened it for us. Thus shall you say to them. And here's their advice. And they're going to get into a little biblical trash talk. I know this doesn't sound super, like trash talk you might have on a basketball court, but like in thousands of years ago, ancient Israel, like this is some epic trash talk, all right? They said, this is what you should say. You should say, my little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. So now they're like, all right, the greatest king in Israel's history, or the most successful king in Israel's history, you should just throw him under the bus. Your little finger is more powerful and more manly and stronger than your dad's thigh, than the strongest part of your father. He is nothing as a leader compared to you. And then they continue. And now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. I'm going to make it worse. And you can imagine like teenage boys saying this, like, that's going to go awesome. You're going to power up, and they're all going to like be scared of you, and you're going to be in control. This is going to be awesome. A bunch of stupid teenage boys talking. All right, y'all aren't stupid teenage boys. These guys are stupid teenage boys. All right, so then they're just going to say the dumbest thing. They're going to say this. You should say this. And you can imagine them laughing and elbowing each other and like, this is going to be so funny. This is really going to get them. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. Sometimes I lead middle school boy groups, and they'll say something, and like all the boys will go, ooh, because it's like, I don't know, like they're talking trash to me or something. And what they said makes no sense. And it sounds stupid, but just because they said it in a certain way, in a certain timing, all the boys are like, ooh, what's Ryan going to say? This is what's going on here. This doesn't even make sense. Have you ever seen a scorpion? They're like this big. This big. What are you going to do? Running around whipping people with a little scorpion. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. It'll sting you. It's not going to hurt anybody else. This is the stupidest, like, trash talk I've ever heard. It doesn't even make sense. But you could imagine them all getting together and be like, this is going to be awesome. So what do you think Rehoboam does? He listens to his friends. Now let me stop before I tell you what happens, and let me tell you this. We all need people in our lives who are more experienced than us and love us enough to say the hard things. We all need people in our lives who are more experienced than us and love us enough to say the hard things. So, here's what happens in the rest of this story. I'm just going to summarize it to you. Rehoboam goes back to Israel 3 days later. And they all come out, and they're like, all right, what you going to do, Rehoboam? And he's like, he pulls out like all the trash talk that his stupid friends told him to give. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to whip you with scorpions and my pinky finger. And he just powers up, and he tries to make himself look powerful. And when all of Israel hears this, essentially here's what happens. They turn to their countrymen and they say, you know what? We're not a part of this. Everybody go back to your homes because we got to fend for ourselves. And so they all go back to their homes. And then Rehoboam tries to double down. And so he sends this taskmaster to basically get people to work in labor camps for him. And all of Israel stones the guy to death. And now Rehoboam's like, oh, crap, they're rebelling against me. And so he gets on his chariot and he escapes back to the palace to hide from the people. I'm just going to read these last two verses, 19 and 20. It says this, so Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and they called him to the assembly and they made him king. This is the other guy, not Rehoboam, Jeroboam. I know it's a little confusing. They sent and they made him king over all Israel. And there was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. So here's what happens. In 1 week, Rehoboam destroyed the nation. 1 week. Everything fell apart in 1 week. Why? Because he walked with foolish people. He listened to fools. And he paid the consequence. His family paid the consequence. And the entire nation would pay the consequence. If you read the rest of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, over and over again, it shows all these evil kings and how they ruin everything. And it says these words, and they walked in the ways of Rehoboam. So for hundreds of years, people looked back to the way that he walked, and they did what he did, and it destroyed the nation. Never again would the nation be unified because of fools. Because a guy stopped walking with the wise, and he started walking with fools. So, I could preach this, and you could be like, oh yeah, that's a great point, and go home, and nothing would change. Here's the deal. We got to get real practical with this, because I've preached stuff like this a lot of times. And here's what happens if you hear it and do nothing. Nothing. You keep going in the direction you're going. You keep hanging out with the same foolish people, and you will suffer the consequences. And the older you get, the worse the consequences get. In middle school, yeah, it's all fun and games. Like, oh my gosh, I cheated on my test, and I said the F word and all that stuff. But then when you get to high school and when you get into college, these decisions and the people that you spend time with, the consequences get a little bit more serious. And we start talking about things that we do with our body sexually and the impact that that makes. We start talking about the things that we put in our body, substances, and the impacts that made. It's all fun and games on a Friday night when you're at a party and you're like, I'm high, I'm so cool. But listen, it's not all fun and games 5 years later when you're addicted and nobody's there for you. And I know it's like, well, that'll never happen to me. Do you know how many addicts have said that? All of them. It all started with a drink at a party. It all started with a joint at a party, with trying to impress somebody. Man, the impact of your decisions, of your relationships, has long-reaching effects. Listen to the proverb. A companion of fools suffers harm. And you're like, well, I don't use drugs and all that. Great. Okay, cool. But how many of you are in relationships that are pulling you away from Jesus? I've seen it over and over again. I'm telling you, the middle schooler that is so committed to Christ, and I'm like, man, wait till they're a senior. They're going to change the world. And I don't even see him as a 9th and 10th grader. Why? Because they dated the wrong person, they hung out with the wrong person, and they walked with fools, and they fell away from their faith. And some of them never come back to it. And I'm not saying they don't go to heaven. I'm not saying they lose their salvation, but their life is a living hell because they walked with fools, and they suffered harm. That doesn't have to be your story. And there's a reason why I get a little bit worked up, because I've seen students do this. Students I love, students I care for, students I've discipled, students I've invested in. And their life falls apart because they're a companion of fools. So let's get real practical. How do you know whether or not you need to end a relationship or you need to kind of pull away from a friendship? Here's the first question. Here's how you know. Are you influencing them or are they influencing you? Very simple question. Are you becoming more like them or are they becoming more like you? If they are pulling you away from Jesus, if they are pulling you away from church, if they're pulling you away from your family, if they are pulling you away from making wise choices and following after Jesus, you have to distance yourself from that person. Now, should you have friends with relationships with unbelievers? Of course you should. We talk about one mores all the time. You should have one mores, but you got to be really careful how much influence you allow foolish people or people making foolish choices to have on you. If they are influencing you, you have to distance yourself. You have to make difficult choices. Are you influencing them or are they influencing you? We say this all the time. Jesus hung out with sinners, but he did not start sinning. He hung out with sinners, but he did not start sinning. He hung out with drunkards, but he did not get drunk. He hung out with prostitutes, but he did not sleep with them. He did not lower himself to the people he spent time with. Now, that's probably the easy question. Probably all of you throughout this entire sermon, before I even said anything, are like, I know the person in my life, or I know the group of friends in my life that pulls me in the wrong direction, that I always end up saying things or doing things that I shouldn't be doing. So, what do you do when you realize you need to distance yourself from them? This is really important. Listen to me. What do you do when you realize you need to distance yourself from them? Because it brings up a difficult question. How do I end a relationship that is pulling me away from Jesus? I've been asked this a lot of times. Here's how you don't do it. Hey, bro, you're going to hell. I'm going to heaven, so I'm not going to be your friend anymore. That's probably not the way to go. It's an option, not the way I would advise you to go. Probably not going to be an attractive thing to your one more. Going to come across a little bit judgmental, a little bit condemning. So what do you do? What do you do when you know you're in that relationship? Maybe it's a dating relationship, maybe it's a friend, a teammate, a coworker, and they're just starting to influence you and pull you away from Jesus. Here's the first thing, the first option. And it's not as hard as you think. Sometimes you don't have to end the relationship, you just need to create distance. Sometimes you don't have to end the relationship, you just have to create distance. What do I mean by that? I mean, you might have some friends who it's cool to hang out with at school or at work or on the practice field. Awesome. But you can't hang out with them in certain places. or at certain times. There are some friends, it's like, great, hang out with them at school, but you can't hang out with them on Friday and Saturday night. You just can't. There are some friends where it's like, if parents are around or if adults are around, you can be with them. But when no parents are around, you can't be with them. There's certain places and times. There's even friends that you might, one-on-one, it might be all good. Y'all can hang out, no issues. But when you get around a group of them, you start pulling away from obedience to Jesus. And you start embracing things that are foolish. So if there are times, places, or activities where you need to stay away from them, just back off in those situations. I had a friend, he was a Christian. It wasn't anything like a substance abuse thing or anything, but in college, I had this friend, and he was just like so cynical and so negative and angry. And every time I'd end up at his house on a Friday or Saturday night playing video games or hanging out or whatever, I left his house feeling angry, bitter, cynical, and sad. And at some point, he's one of my best friends. He went to my wedding. He was an usher, like all the things. Like he was very involved in my life. I just made a choice. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anybody. I just made a choice. On those nights, I'm just not going over there. It's just not good for me. It's not good for my soul. It's not good for my mental and emotional status. I'm just going to stay away. Some of y'all just need to do that. Now, I've had students over the years that are like, I tried to back away, and then I got the text. I got the text like, why aren't you hanging out with us anymore? You think you're better than us? And then they're like, well, I've been confronted, and I've kind of been caught, and what do I do now? Let me close with this. Sometimes you may have to say the hard things. Sometimes you may have to say the hard things. And here's how you do it. You don't say, well, you're like a demon in my life, and you're seeking to kill, steal, and destroy from me, and I just don't think, here's all you got to do. And this is a great way, actually, to reach people for Jesus. You just say this. Hey, God's calling me to do something, and when I hang out with you or with certain people, y'all just kind of go in a different direction than God's calling me to go. And so for that reason, I can't do that anymore. I can't go to those places. I can't go to those parties. I can't hang out with you in the way that I used to, because I just feel like God's calling me to fill in the blank. And I've just got to back away. That's not condemnation. That's not judgmental. That's just telling somebody, hey, I got to value my relationship with Jesus above anything else. And here's the thing with Jesus. He always came in truth and grace. So he told the truth, but he led with grace. There's this woman caught in adultery. She's caught in sin. And y'all remember the story maybe, John 8, and they all pick up the rocks to kill her. And then Jesus is like, all right, whoever hasn't sinned, throw the first stone. And then they all leave. And then he's like, well, woman, where are your condemners? And she's like, I don't know. And he says, well, neither do I condemn you. So he led with grace. But then at the end, he says something really important. He says, go now and leave your life of sin. Here's what he's saying. I don't want you to end up in this place again. I don't want you to end up in a place where your life is at risk and I'm not there to protect you. You've got to walk away from the foolishness. You've got to walk away from the sin, and you've got to do things differently. So when you have these conversations, lead with grace, lead with love, but you just got to say the hard things sometimes. And you just got to tell people, man, this is what I believe God's calling me to. And maybe they'll misunderstand you. And maybe they'll look down on you. And maybe they'll gossip behind your back. But you have to do what God's called you to do. Listen to me. You've got to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd, not the voice of your friends. Not what you think they even think about you, which most of the time isn't even true. You just think them, and you come up with all these stories about how much everyone hates you. And it's most of the time not even true. They're not even thinking about you. But we just get all built up, and we're like, oh my gosh, my life's falling apart. We just got to do whatever God calls us to do. Let me read it to you one more time. Proverbs 13:20. He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. So it's not just avoiding the bad, it's also embracing the good. So here's what I want you to think about. And you don't even have to write it down so that there's no physical evidence of the answer to this question. But here's an action step for you as we close in worship. Think about one person you need to step closer to and one person you need to step back from. One wise person following Jesus that you need to step closer to, and one person that you need to step away from. And here's what I want to do. We're going to close with a couple songs. And I want you to come up to the altar, and I want you to get down on the prayer rugs, and I want you to get on your face and beg God for wisdom and courage. Courage to do the hard thing that everything in you is like, don't do it. It's gonna be so embarrassing and it's not gonna go well. You just gotta beg the Holy Spirit for courage to do what God is calling you to do. Don't leave this place and just keep going about your business. It's not gonna end well. You will suffer harm. Your life will get broken to pieces. So walk in the way that God has called you. Walk in wisdom. And walk in relationships that are Christ-centered and point you in the right direction. Let me pray. And then we'll worship. Heavenly Father, I pray that we would not just hear it, but we would do it. I pray for the high schooler in this room that even as I'm talking, they're thinking about that boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, I can't possibly break up with them. And Lord, maybe you're calling them to do that. Maybe you're calling them to distance themselves from a friend or a friend group. And it's awkward and there's tension and it's like, I don't want to go down that path, and it gets their heart racing and they just want to get out of here so they can ignore it and keep on living their life. Help them see what's at stake. Their future. The future of their family, the future of their friend group, the future of their one more. So many things are at stake on our side of obedience. Help us take the step of obedience so that we can see all you have for us. Lord, thank you. Not just that you loved us, not only that you died for us so that we would have eternity, but that you've also given us steps and wisdom to live a life here on earth that is just better with you. Help us walk with the wise and grow wise. Help us walk away from fools so we can be safe from the things that we don't have to walk through. In your name we pray. Amen. Let's worship together.